Well, we've finally managed to pin you down, and it's off the back of a contract extension. Tell us more about that.
Well, I've been here 12 years now, coming up, and Tony and I are always looking as far into the future as we can to try and not only extend our vision and evolve our vision, but also to create as much stability as we can. And so obviously he's going nowhere, which is great. And we talked about, what my future looked like, and we agreed that, if I could and wanted to commit to the club to 2030, there was an opportunity to do so. And I've always been guided by people in football that you pick your owner over the club, and we've got a great owner, we've also got a great club. So for me as the chief executive, it was an easy decision to come to stay for another 6 seasons.
6 seasons, Paul, that you could maybe have a 6-year plan. I mean, in the first 12 years you achieved promotion to the Premier League, you qualified for European competition for the first time in 123 years of the club. Do you have a grand vision for the next 6 years, or do you take it season by season?
I think certainly Tony and the board have talked about what we want to try to achieve by 2030. We want to be a regular top 10 club. We want to compete in Europe again. We'd love to win a trophy, but we know we're not alone in all of those aspirations. We know that there are clubs slightly above us, slightly below us, around us. There might even be clubs that are coming through the EFL at the moment who want to replicate what we've done. So the one thing we're all agreed on is that we can't afford to stand still. We've got to keep looking forward. We've got to keep looking for ways of improving, not just on the pitch but off the pitch. We can't be self-satisfied with what's been achieved so far. So yes, there is a plan for sure, and we think there are no ceilings to what we can achieve. We just simply need to keep working very, very hard to be the best that we can be.
Talking of ceilings, finishing 6th last season obviously raised expectations. It raised the bar, didn't it? And do you think it's slightly unrealistic for supporters in some senses to expect a top 6 finish every year? Is a top 10 finish the minimum, and then you try and go from there?
Yeah, our vision is definitely to be a regular top 10 finisher. I mean, we started this season, I think, winning the first 5 of 6 Premier League games. We have won 5 of our 8 games in Europe. It hasn't been a bad season. The last 16 of Europa League, last 16 of the FA Cup. I don't think we've been out of the top 10 in the Premier League all season. And yet, you do hear 1 or 2 sort of whinges out there, which is understandable because, expectations do go up. And we understand that. Roberto is driving us to be even better every week. So it's not just coming from fans, it's coming internally as well. But we're also realistic that we're in the toughest league in the world against some of the biggest clubs in the world with the biggest budgets in the world. And it's not easy. And there will be times, particularly when I think this season at various points we've had 14 of our 25 first team players injured for 3, 4, 5 games and more in some cases. Obviously Solly's been out a long time. Mitoma's now been out quite a while as well. These are players that are critical to what we do and how we do it. A lot of goals have been lost with those injuries, a lot of stability, but also more importantly a lot of Roberto's ability to refresh the squad and refresh the starting lineup at critical times. That hurts you. It would hurt any team. It's certainly going to hurt us.
I think, like you say, the expectation has gone up, and I can imagine that's frustrating, especially when you go back to last summer and you see the type of midfielders we lost in Caicedo and McAllister. 2 players, obviously one breaking the transfer record, the other one that is lighting up the Premier League at the moment. But I just want to go back to the contract situation. Was it a hard decision? Because when you look across football at the moment, there's some big clubs rebuilding in transition. There's new leagues sprouting up all over the world. So is it easy to close out that outside noise and put pen to paper?
For me, yes, because as I said, I really enjoy working with Tony and the board. It's a great club, got fantastic staff here who are really committed to what we're doing. They believe in what we're doing. They want us to get better. So you've got a natural energy in the club that a lot of chief executives would die for, frankly.
But you've created that.
I've been part of it for sure, but there's also been a lot of really good executives around the club during my time here. Some have been on the whole journey with my 12 years here. Some have been on part of it. Some have come into it at certain points when we've needed added energy. But all the while, you've had an owner that is committed, loves the club, has put his money exactly where his mouth is at times when we've most needed it, has stayed calm when there's been bumps in the road, and we've talked often about bumps in the road, can destabilise football clubs because people can panic and make rash decisions. That's not what Tony does, that's not what we do as a club. And each time there has been a bump in the road, we've used it to build resilience in the club and learn from that bump, and how can we then do things better in the future when there's another bump, because there will be. This business will be full of bumps. It doesn't matter whether you're Manchester City or Brighton, Hove, Albion, there will be bumps in the road at some point. And those bumps are all relative. For City, it might be finishing second or third. For us, it might be finishing outside of the top 10 in 1 or 2 seasons in the next 6 or whatever. But we have to learn as a football club to ride out and become more resilient to those bumps. And I think we are. And I think each year that goes by, I think the fans' expectations will go up, and we almost want them to, because it means we are improving and we are pushing their own expectations higher. But we also have to be realistic that in order to maintain the position that we're in, we have to be very good, and at times we have to be very lucky.
When a really big job comes up at a big Premier League club, yours is always the first name to come up, Paul. This 6-year contract presumably will deter a few people. You might get a bit of peace. You won't see your name in the papers quite so often, will you?
No, that's fine. And it's all. I think we've always said that in our jobs, and particularly those like in Roberto's job, if you're doing well at a club that perhaps has people's expectations lower than the biggest clubs, then you're likely to come under some scrutiny, and your profile is likely to go up, and therefore you become more desirable. And that's the same whether you're Roberto, whether you're our best players, whether you're our best staff. If you're doing a good job, then in football the chances are others will be interested in you. And we've seen that at this club over many years now. And we take that as a big compliment. But we also make sure that we have a succession plan in place to deal with it. And that's the best that we can do. We can protect ourselves contractually as best we can. But also we can have a plan in place to make sure that if someone does go, it doesn't affect us.
Recently, the club announced profits of 123 million. I suppose the question is, how do we get there?
Well, performances on the pitch drive the vast majority of that, and then of course player trading is a big part. Performances on the pitch, because there's merit money in the Premier League. The higher you finish, the more you will generate in income. The better you're playing, the easier it is to fill up your stadium, sell your hospitality, generate sponsorship income, drive other commercial deals. And then of course when it comes to player trading, when you're doing well and the players are the biggest part of that, obviously, then they're going to become desirable to the biggest clubs. And we've been fortunate over the years and worked hard over the years to find really good players, develop those players, and this is where Tony is fantastic, to be prepared to sell them at the right time whilst maintaining that performance on the pitch. And that's the really difficult trick to pull off, because you're asking the coach to, in the case of last summer, lose a Moises and an Alexis, but the following year compete on 4 fronts and try and do just as well, if not better. And that's a hard trick to pull off. And so to be successful on and off the pitch at the same time is very, very difficult for any football club.
How hard is that balance? Because we've seen many clubs do it in the Premier League before, namely one just along the coast in Southampton, who would develop players and sell them, and eventually they've come unstuck, they find themselves in the Championship. They look like they might come at the Premier League, which is great news for southern-based teams. But how hard is it to be able to sell your so-called best players and keep progressing the club?
Yeah, I think the key thing that I said, Glenn, was to sell at the right time. And for us, the right time is when you've got the players that you need to replace the ones you're selling through the door already, being developed elsewhere already, or actually ready to go straight into your first team even before the players you sell are ready to go. So in the case of when Basuma went, you remember that Moises was already through the door, and that made a big difference to us. Carlos has started over the last month or so, I think most people would agree, to find his feet in the Premier League and to look like the kind of player that we always thought he could be in the Premier League. And obviously he's still very young, and there's going to be those ups and downs moments for him. But it is hard to keep doing what Southampton did in the past and what we're doing now. For us, it's a combination of making sure our academy is the best it can be by bringing through young local talent, but also looking across the world for that young talent as well. Whereas I think Southampton's model was more about developing their own players through their own academy. So we've got a sort of a twin track approach to that. And as you know, we're not averse to bringing in a Lallana, a Milner, a Welbeck, or maintaining in the squad players like Pascal Gross, Lewis Dunk, Joel Veltman, that experience blended with the young players that are coming through. And of course, it's always great when a Jack Hinchelwood comes through. You know, been here since he was 7 or 8 years of age and come all the way through the ranks. And you know, what a great shame again that he became one of those statistics on our injury list, because Jack was really beginning to sort of develop into an established first team player at 18, 19 years of age, and scoring goals at the top level as well from a defensive position. So, you know, we need to keep doing that, and if we can, there's no reason why we can't continue to prosper.
Let's put some context on that profit, Paul, of £122.8 million, because somebody outside the club might look at that number and say, oh, well, Brighton are making a profit from selling players now. But the context, of course, is interest-free loans from the owner of £406 million and a lot of commitment to covering the operating losses over many years before the club found itself in this position or arrived in this position. So it's not a windfall, is it? It's not a gift to the club. You know, it has to be set in the context of the bigger business picture, doesn't it?
It really does, and I think it's easy to look at a season where you've made over £100 million and say, wow, you know, that's incredible, and season ticket prices should be cut and we should be giving this away and giving that away. But we've also got to put into context that Tony has effectively loaned the club nearly £500 million over this period. And for a lot of my first 12 years here, you know, we were loss making. You know, in the Championship, we were losing money in order to develop the club and progress to the Premier League. We made money in our first season in the Premier League, and then in order to stay competitive and to stay in the league, we had to invest even more. Tony lost even more. And so, you know, this year it was a real, for me personally, a relief as much as a delight to be able to pay something back to Tony. And if you look at what we're paying back, it's a relatively small sum of money, you know, compared to what he's loaned the club. But we've always talked about being less dependent on Tony and more sustainable as a club. And this is an important first step, I think, towards being that. And I'm proud of that, and the staff should be proud of that, because every single person in the club has contributed in some way to that. You know, literally from the players and the coaches who've delivered the performance on the pitch, to the guys that have been making sure the stadium sold out, to the commercial guys who've extended contracts with American Express and Nike and so on. Everybody's played a part in that, and you know, and also a big part of it has been our increased profile and the brand awareness now that we've got across the world, which is making us attractive to overseas sponsors, overseas audiences. Last summer's tour in the US was a sellout everywhere we went. 10 or 15 years ago, people would have laughed at us if you'd have said Brighton would go to the United States and sell out a stadium of 65,000. But we did that, and you know, I suspect we'll do it again.
So fans would see that £123 million figure and think, oh, we can spend all that on players this summer. It's not quite as simple as that, is it?
It's not quite as simple. One, it's not our style to go out and spend, you know, that kind of money on players. And secondly, you know, it's 1 year. You know, if we were doing this sort of year after year for a decade, then I suspect Tony and myself, well, it won't be me because by 2030 I won't be here, but Tony will be under pressure to spend more money. But our model is our model, and we know our place in the football hierarchy. It doesn't mean to say that we're not punching to be higher than people perceive us to be, but we're also cognizant of the fact that we don't have tens of millions to spend in the transfer market, or you know, we won't be at the highest earning end of the players' sort of scale. So, you know, we have to be what we are, and we have to be proud of that, but also continue to find ways to compete.